Big Ten Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into Big Ten Plus 4, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. If you're joining us on one of the video platforms and not just the audio podcast platform, you'll see there's 3 heads up here. Usually it's just 2 of us, and it's been a bit of Sam and I throughout the time. Sam Sprunger's there. I'm Dalton Shetler. But Tony Hollandsworth, who's subbed in a couple of times. You might be familiar if you're a weekly loyal listener. Has been able to sub in. He's joining. The Big Ten expanded, so we thought, why don't we expand the Big Ten Plus 4 podcast? So
by 33%.
You're right.
Exactly.
So Tony Hollandsworth, thank you so much for being with us, and we're really looking forward to working with you quite frequently.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and of course, it's going to be fun to actually get to work with you, Dalton. I've only ever heard great things from Sam. And of course, I've watched your guys' podcast. I always enjoy it. So it's fun to be able to work with the guy that helps make all this happen along with Sam. So
he makes it. I'm excited. Come on now.
I gave him a little credit. Come on.
No, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're really excited to have Tony with us, and it's going to be a great time to bring Tony in here because you might be starting to notice the weather's dropping just a tick.
Yeah.
The air's getting crisp. Leaves are starting to change. It can only mean Big Ten football is back. I thought you were going to
say pumpkin spice was
well, we'll be. I'm sure pumpkin patches are on the schedule as well. That's got to find a way to get around those football games, but all those different things. But no, Big Ten football is finally here. We kick off this weekend, fellas. Are we ready for this?
I'm one of those that I'm always excited. And while I am a Purdue and Big Ten fan, I'm just happy there's football, period. It just works out nicely that there's some Big Ten football out there that we can talk about.
Yeah, and it's not like I know a lot of people, whenever they think football, they think NFL preseason, and that's not bad. That's something. But, a lot of times it's kind of like spring games. It's like, okay, you just want to see what your depth looks like. You want to see who you have. You're like, okay, is our defense still going to potentially be bad? Is our offense going to be good? Are they not? You kind of get to test out maybe some new people that have come into the building. But yeah, like Sam said, even if you're not necessarily a Nebraska and Northwestern fan, I know Illinois plays Wyoming as well. It's still actual good football in games that games that do matter. So it will be fun this weekend to see that.
You got to look at one thing. Northwestern or Nebraska will have their fan base will be like, yeah, we're winning the West because after this Saturday.
Well, and it's amazing too because Nebraska again coming off a year where actually both these teams were 1-8 in the conference. Mm-hmm. Nebraska's fan base certainly expects a little bit more. Northwestern's had good recent success, but the expectations I don't think are always to be a Big Ten champion contender. The Huskers came to the Big Ten thinking, oh, this is territory we can roam and we can dominate. And for a fan base that spends so much energy and time into Nebraska football because that's all there is. The radio broadcasts, I talked to somebody the other day, they're 11 hours long. A radio broadcast for Nebraska game day. Like that, this is the Nebraska fan base. This is what they care about. It is, they eat, breathe, live it. And we're talking about a team that went 1-8 last year that if you pop out the numbers, like if you punch it through the algorithm, should have been 6-3, should have been 7-2. But because they just couldn't get over the hump, here they are. And now in the most Big Ten place possible, Dublin, Ireland, right? Nebraska and Northwestern will get to start the season, and we'll see what happens. And we'll talk a little bit about, we'll get our final predictions. We'll lock it in before we actually kick things off later in the show. We'll do some of that. But let's stay here with Nebraska and Northwestern for a moment because I'm curious to see I'll give you a bit of a teaser for when we go to do our picks. I got 3 ideas of who I think wins the West. I got a safe pick. I got one that I want to pick. And then I got the biggest risk, and that biggest risk is Nebraska, because the Adrian Martinez era is over. Martinez has transferred out to Kansas State. Coming in is Casey Thompson from Texas, and he's officially been named the starter for week 1 for the Huskers. So to me, I'm curious between shuffling some different things around in the coach's room and moving some different things, really bolstering up and paying more of an emphasis on special teams. You bring Casey Thompson in. How does this look for Nebraska? Does all of a sudden everything change for the Huskers? Because a lot of people can say that not necessarily Adrian Martinez was a problem or horrible. It just didn't fit. He kept trying to maybe do one too many things when it came down to crunch time, and it eventually just didn't work out. So do you guys believe, you bring in Casey Thompson, that this changes the track for the Huskers this season?
Go ahead, Tony. I'll let you cover this one first, and then I'll jump in.
Okay. Yeah, I think Casey Thompson helps them a lot. You know, Casey Thompson to me is he's a better athlete. And honestly, you know, like you said, Dalton, it wasn't that Adrian Martinez was bad, by no means. It was just he's not a fan of throwing the football first. He is a big time runner. It's where a lot of his scores came from. You know, if you look at some of his stats, you know, he was rushing for over 500 yards every single year he was at Nebraska. He had double-digit touchdowns last year. He had 13, but 35 total career rushing touchdowns, as compared to, you know, he's not a big thrower. He only had 14 passing touchdowns last year, and he had just about 1 or 2 interceptions short of being, you know, 1-1 in that category, and that's been the tale of his career throughout Nebraska. So it'll be interesting to see how Casey Thompson starts. And I think not only for Casey, it was better to move on, because I don't feel that he fits Steve Sarkisian's scheme down in Texas. I feel like Steve is looking for more of that traditional pocket passer, which is where we saw, you know, Mac Jones thrive when he was at Alabama. Casey doesn't really fit that profile. Now he comes to Nebraska with Scott Frost. I think Scott Frost would want somebody that's more of a traditional passer, but it doesn't hurt to have a big-bodied athlete in Casey Thompson, who can, you know, also move with his legs if he needs to as well. Plus, Casey Thompson has a winning record. He's 9-7 overall in his college career. Last year was his first big start. He went 5-7. Before that, he played kind of some meaningless games. He won all of them, but he played in kind of some meaningless games for the most part, and filled in for Sam Ehlinger when he's hurt. So it will bring something different to Nebraska. And if I remember right, they have 11 players returning back on defense. So they have pretty much their entire defensive cast that played last year coming back with another year under their belt, a little bit more motivation, and hopefully a little bit happier that the offense has more potential now, with a new quarterback, new system, that hopefully they'll elevate that play level as well.
I agree with about all of that. My biggest concern is Nebraska still snake bitten? I mean, they literally have the same amount of points as they gave up. They scored that many last year. Is that, or was it within 7 points, Dalton? It was
the point differential in Big Ten play was an even wash.
Right. So, like, that is being snake bitten. When you're 1-8 in the stinking conference and you have the exact same points scored as you give up, that's being snake bitten. And we've covered this even a little bit, but if they can get over that, I think your pick might even be dead on as your surprise team or whatever, or your unsafe or your out on a limb pick, Dalton, because Nebraska's always got good athletes. I mean, that's the pedigree of the blue blood that Nebraska is. They pull in a lot. I mean, anybody in that Midwest area, they are the ones that kids grew up listening to and loving and everything. So they're going to maybe give Nebraska that leg up and potentially be the one that where they're going. But if they can get over the two plays or whatever it is that determined the outcome of their games so many times last year, they might be in Indianapolis in December. Like so while all that helps, I think it's just their luck this year determines what they have this year.
Because it was really rough last year. I mean, to your point, the Michigan State game, I saw down close in person, and if the punt goes to the other side of the field, that game probably never gets to overtime. And the punt goes, Jaden Reed's able to return it with 5 minutes left in the game to tie it up, and overtime able to sneak out the win. But it was that case with Michigan. It was that case kind of with Ohio State. They were there late in that game, even kind of controlled it. So we'll see what happens there.
They lost to Purdue by 7 points, and it was just one play.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, they're literally 6 plays away from being 7-2 in the conference rather than the 1-8 that they were.
And they open up with Northwestern. A lot of people are counting Northwestern out. A lot of folks have 5 teams in the West Division that are really contending. The 2 not both reside in Illinois. They're saying the Illini and the Wildcats both are kind of on the outside looking in. We'll start with Sam because he feels very passionate about Pat Fitzgerald and that you never count out Fitzgerald.
Well, let's say it this way. How many times in the past 4 years, Dalton, have they represented the West in the championship? Yeah. So 50%. So, and were any of those years that they thought, oh, Northwestern is the team in the West? No, they came out and surprised everybody. And so, yeah, you never keep or count a Pat Fitzgerald team out of contention. So whether and people may be absolutely right. They may be 1-8 or whatever in the conference. They may only win one game. That may be this weekend, or they might only beat Illinois or whatever. But the point is you never until they have lost and finished last. I don't ever put Northwestern in last place. It's kind of like you don't put baby in a corner. I mean, you just don't.
What
say
you, Tony?
Yeah, and I think it'll be a lot closer because if you remember last year, Nebraska thumped Northwestern, and I mean it was one of Nebraska's probably best games of the entire season.
And not to interrupt you, Tony, but the reason why the Big Ten point differential was an even wash for Nebraska is because they beat Northwestern, was it 56-7? So the 8 losses they had combined for 49, their 49-point win. Go on, Tony.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, for Northwestern, this is going to be a little bit of a revenge game. They are going to be in more neutral territory, so you don't have to worry about Husker Nation traveling and potentially having to deal with the crowd noise. You might probably have a few fans over there in Ireland. Never know. I don't know if everybody in Nebraska can fly out there. I mean, they, like we found out with the 11-hour podcast, they might try. They might try. But no, I wouldn't count them out. I think it is going to be a close game. And I would always say that at just about every conference game, you can never count somebody out. And you can't count somebody out that you play all the time. Just like we talked about, Nebraska was just a few games away from being 7-2. If you look at their schedule last year, they almost beat Oklahoma. They only lost to them by 7, and that was when Oklahoma was ranked 3 at the time. And of course, like we talked about, they just barely lost to Ohio State. They lost to Purdue at the last second, just barely lost to Michigan. So I mean, this is a team that's there, and I think a lot of it is, if you have a decent quarterback that can overcome a lot of bad things. If your defense is tired and they're constantly having to be out on the field because your offense can't produce, or they stutter, or they make a mistake, your defense will eventually break. I'm a big fan of bend, don't break, but eventually it's going to break if they're having to be on the field more than you are. So I think it'll be a close game. I think this will be a good one. And like you guys said, I wouldn't necessarily count Northwestern out.
All right, well, if we get down to picks for this game, because, oh, gosh, it feels good just to do predictions again. It just feels so good. All right, Nebraska Northwestern, who do you guys have a win in it?
Tony, go ahead. Guests first.
All right. Oof. I'm going to say 28-27. I'm going to give the win to Nebraska again. I think
1 point game. You're really staying true with your word.
Yep, I do. I think it's going to be close. This is one of those. I could see some good offense, probably some good defense, because I still feel. I know the old saying is don't let them put up over 20 on you. If you do, you've had a bad defensive game. It's like, well, you got to remember this is college too. The higher scoring the game, the better. So if you can keep them to under 4 touchdowns, I think this game will stay close.
Sam?
Oh, it's so hard to predict, but I love doing it. I could be totally wrong, and that's okay. I'm not afraid of that. But it's just like, it's like the big dance. You know,
Well, and especially
March.
we're talking about Nebraska here, Sam. It's a team that the computers say should have went 7-2 in the Big Ten, and they went 1-8 with the stats.
But
like,
yet
we're going to be wrong through these.
But yet I don't want to pick against Pat Fitzgerald either. I mean, like, I really don't. But honestly, I think Nebraska is probably going to be a lot more in contention than they were last year. And I think Scott Frost actually gets the W this year, you know, in a close. I mean, last year they thumped Northwestern, but, you know, I got to go with Nebraska. And I'm going to say it's something like 35-28. I mean, like just a little bit of a high scoring one, but not in the 50s at least.
Okay. See, and for me, I also like Nebraska here too, and I feel like there is, when you start kind of factoring in some of the different motivating factors, including Scott Frost being on the hot seat and understanding he's kind of in a prove-it year, I think the players understand that. Well,
we've talked about that. But is he?
I think because his contract was cut down, so I think this is kind of a prove it from Trev Albert saying, we got to get this thing kind of going. And I think Nebraska fans wanted to see what it looks like with Adrian Martinez. I think they've been frustrated, but they want to see what this looks like without it. I think the Huskers are motivated. I think it's a 2-touchdown game. I like it being around 35-21-ish, kind of in the ballpark. And that's really, a lot of that just has to do with Northwestern losing so much defensively. They bring back 5 starters. They lose Brandon Joseph, who was a key pin there in the secondary. They lose Chris, and forgive me, I'm blanking on the last name, but he had 141 tackles from the linebacker spot last year. So there's a lot to overcome with Northwestern, and offensively, things have been rather stagnant in Evanston for a few years, even when they found a way to win the West.
Right.
So I like Nebraska by 2 scores. But gosh, this just feels good. But I tell you what, too, we're going to end the first quarter. We'll get to the second quarter, and we'll talk a little Illinois football before we get to our actual West predictions. So let's go ahead and move to the second quarter.
It worked.
It did. And we're in the second quarter, and we're going to stay in the West Division because there are, and Tony laid it out perfectly, there's 2 games this weekend that factor in the West. There's not a single game with the Big Ten East involved this weekend. We have the Northwestern Nebraska we already talked about. We also have Wyoming at Illinois. By the way, the Northwestern Nebraska kick is at 12:30 on Saturday, again, from Dublin, Ireland. And then Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, it's Wyoming at Illinois. The Illini in the second year under Brett Bielema. We'll start, Tony. What do you feel about the Illini and what Brett's been able to do, and what's maybe the projection for the second year?
I feel like they're going to be good. You know, as much as I was upset that Lovie Smith was basically cut by Illinois, I feel like, you know, he is good about at least laying a good foundation of good players, good culture. And luckily they were able to capitalize on that last year. Again, they were one of the teams, they were bottom of the Big Ten. They were bottom of a lot of college stats. But again, this is one of those, it's another year in a coach's system, which a lot of times the second year is when you'll see the growth, you'll see the progression of a team and how well they do. And against a team like Wyoming, who, you know, Wyoming, they don't always get, you know, completely quote unquote rated by the NFL, but, you know, they do end up losing out a lot of times just because of the draft. So I feel like this is a Wyoming team. They're probably going to be devoid of a little bit of talent. And it might be a little bit of a rough game for them against Illinois, because Illinois is having a good amount of starters come back too, if I remember correctly. If it, what was it, 7 or 8, if I remember right?
7 on offense and 6 on defense.
Yeah. So that's a lot of talent that was there before, again, coming back into another year of the coach's system with new talent. So I think this is going to be one of those, this is going to be kind of Illinois' coming out party, at least, to say, hey, you know, we may be in contention for the West, but we're at least going to be taken a little bit more seriously now. Again, just to step up. And a lot of people say, well, you beat Wyoming. Well, a win is still a win, because if we saw last year, you know, Cincinnati had to go undefeated to even be considered in going into the playoffs. So every win that you can get does matter, even if it is against a school like Wyoming. So I'm interested to see how Illinois does. And to Dalton's point, This is, just the Big Ten West playing this weekend. Our first Big Ten East division is actually the Michigan State Spartans on September 2nd against Western Michigan. So,
Friday Night Lights, baby,
at 7 p.m. So that'll be our first, Big Ten East game at least.
That's and the great storyline there before you jump in, Sam, is, of course, Michigan State brings back starting quarterback Peyton Thorne, and there's a lot of excitement in East Lansing. A lot of folks love what Peyton Thorne broke the single season passing touchdown mark last year in Michigan State history. He beat out Kirk Cousins and Connor Cook with 28 touchdowns thrown. So people are excited to see Thorne back, but he goes against his dad Friday night. His dad was the head coach at North Central College in Illinois, a lower level college football program, but he just got hired as the offensive coordinator at Western Michigan. So be ready for that storyline of dad versus son Friday night at Spartan Stadium. That should be fun.
You say dad versus son, but yet they're both on offense, so they're not playing against, or they're not going against each other.
We made a couple of those jokes earlier on in the week too, talking about that. Like, thank gosh, if he's defensive coordinator, like you don't blitz in that situation, right? You can't,
or you do every play.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a true dad, you do love your kid, but you kind of do the stuff that pokes at him, like I hate it whenever he blitzes with a safety. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do a safety blitz every play then.
Which one's coming? Which quarter?
But yeah, no, that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. And we can talk a little bit about the East and Michigan State and some of those teams in a moment. But Sam, if you want to hit back on Illinois for a moment as they host Wyoming this weekend. So
I'm looking at their schedule, and Illinois easily could be 4-0 at the end of their first 4 games because they've got Wyoming, IU, Virginia, and Chattanooga. Yep. Then after that, let's look at their schedule. Good Lord. Wisconsin, versus Iowa, versus Minnesota, at Nebraska, versus Michigan State, versus Purdue, at Michigan. That's and then they wrap it up with Northwestern. Wow. Yeah. They could be 4-0, and then by the end of that trip or that string, have a losing record because
fighting for a bowl game.
Yeah. And so I don't know. Illinois is kind of one of those that, and real quick sidetrack, I told Tony this already, but absolutely the worst color scheme game ever. Illinois and Wyoming.
Oh,
mustard, yellow and brown, and bright orange and navy blue. Oh my God. There will be headaches watching that game.
This is going to be one of the few times I'm proud to be colorblind, so I won't be like fully exposed to a lot of this. I can just be like, man, those are some rough looking jerseys.
So I'm looking at their offense, Northwestern, Illinois' offense, and if they can get their passing game going, I mean, they were dead last in the Big Ten, 156 yards a game, and you don't need to be pass heavy, but you kind of need a little bit more than that. You need to average close to 200, 250, somewhere in there, to where you've got a more balanced attack. And I mean, it just and if their rushing offense was pretty decent, they were middle of the pack. So I mean, it's not, they weren't horrible, but you can't it might have been even better if they had a better passing game that helped supplement that. So it's one of those that if they can cure that, their defense was pretty solid, and they were returning more than half of them.
Yep.
So it's quite possible that Illinois could be a lot better than what people are predicting. Now, they could be the dumpster fire that a lot of people are thinking, but they could be easily a little bit more of a surprise team than people are thinking they might not be.
And I do think momentum is building in Champaign. I just don't think I think this is one of the unique years where there's quite a bit of depth in the Western Division. That's usually been kind of the thing you could poke in that group. But we're talking about 5 teams that could contend and maybe win the West title. But you bring up the backfield. Big news for the Illini is running back Chase Brown is back this year. He's on the Maxwell Award watch list. He ran for more than 1,000 yards last year. That's huge for Illinois' offense. And you bring up the passing game. One of the really interesting things we're going to see on Saturday is Brandon Peters is gone. There's going to be a new quarterback at Illinois, and we don't know yet if it's going to be Artur Sikowski the transfer who came in a couple of years ago from Rutgers, or if it will be the Syracuse transfer. I'm blanking on the guy. Hang on, let me find this because this is going to bother me.
Of course, you had just asked. There we go.
Tommy DeVito. Thank you,
There
Tony. But we don't know. It's going to be between those two. We don't know yet who that starter will be. And likewise on the Wyoming side, we don't know who Wyoming starter is either. I don't believe. So this is going to be interesting when we get to 4:00 on Saturday and we find out what quarterback trots out on both sides. Yeah, it's really going to be fascinating. But that will tell us a lot more too about this Illinois team. Before we hit halftime, let's get to the West picks. Who does everybody like to win the West this year?
I'm going to go ahead and go with this real quick, Tony. I'll jump on there. I have two teams that I think are gonna be the top two and yes, my shirt says one of the teams, but that's okay. I really think Purdue. Aiden O'Connell is a phenomenal. If Purdue can produce in the backfield from the backfield, at least some semblance of a threat of a running game, I think Purdue's gonna win the West because of, we've talked about it multiple times, their schedule lends to them being in position to win the West. It just does. And Aiden O'Connell, he's one. I think he could honestly. I hate saying this because people are going to be like, "Oh, you're just being a homer." He could be the offensive player of the year in the Big Ten. That's how I've seen him throw, but I've also seen him throw 4 interceptions in a game. And
now, to be fair, Sam, CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba are in this conference.
I get that. But at the same time, you know, just as much as I do is, sometimes those, if a player has an exceptionally good season out of their norm, they might lean that way because you expect Stroud and Njigba to put up those huge numbers. You expect Aiden O'Connell to be good, but does he put even comparable numbers up to them? That might be enough to give him Offensive Player of the Year. That's kind of where my thought was.
And before Tony ends up jumping in here, I do want to mention, too, a little bit of the irony that, of course, Iowa's competing for this West Division title, but maybe a big part of the reason why Purdue can compete for it is because 2 Hawkeyes transferred to West Lafayette this offseason, in Charlie Jones, who was the returner of the year in the Big Ten, and Tyrone Tracy. And from talking with some folks at Purdue, they don't think that there's necessarily another Rondale Moore or David Bell just sitting in the closet to grab and throw out there because of how special they were. But they think Tyrone Tracy can be the playmaker that Aiden O'Connell needs at wide receiver. So those 2 Hawkeyes might absolutely lift Purdue maybe to a title.
So I'm personally I think it's between Minnesota and Purdue personally. And it's little bit of a homerism. I'm going to take Purdue.
Okay, Tony.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sam's other team that he mentioned. I'm going to go with Minnesota. I feel like PJ Fleck is doing really good with that program. He had a rough start his first couple of years. 5-7 and then 7-6. He went 11-2. Then of course, COVID happened. Unfortunately, ended up having a losing record. That was a bad year. That was a bad year for everybody. Then last year they went 9-4, and that was even without their starting running back that they lost. Initially, was it Ibrahim Muhammad, if I remember right?
Mo Ibrahim.
And
he's back.
And he's back.
Yeah.
And they lost him early, unfortunately, against that Ohio State game, and that was a great game.
In the third quarter, and he nearly had 200 yards.
Yeah, and they made Ohio State struggle. That defense got exposed last year, which is supposed to be better. We'll see how well that goes. But I like Minnesota coming out of it. Because to me, and I've talked with Sam about this, I'm not sold on Wisconsin anymore. Wisconsin, they're still good, but they're not the powerhouse in the West that they used to be for a long time.
I want to ask why here. What bothers you about Wisconsin?
My ex-wife. That's the biggest thing that bothers me about Wisconsin.
Well, okay.
I have a whole guidebook here that helps me through Football Guide, and that was not anywhere on here.
Well, I think you should put it in there so
Right?
you can. Yeah, Tony's ex-wife. Okay, there we go.
Like that's the key. But no, it's watching Wisconsin over the years, for a long time, especially when it seemed like they were the running back university of the Big Ten. It was like you had Melvin Gordon, you had
Jonathan Taylor, Ron Dane.
What was it say? Ron Dane.
Yeah, Ron Dane. So it's like you've had a lot of running backs churn out of Wisconsin. Now you don't really have those as much. The quarterback, and I talked with Sam about this. I didn't really care for Jack Cohn when he was there. I felt like statistically he was okay, but he couldn't get Wisconsin to that win. And I feel that they're still searching for that quarterback to be able to lead them. Now, defensively, I feel Wisconsin is still very good. I mean, offensively, at least offensive line, they're still fantastic. Heck, they still churn out, NFL talent all the time. I would easily be able to argue they're probably top 5 universities as far as, offensive line talent. But to me, the big thing is just the quarterback more than anything as far as Wisconsin goes. And then I do think Iowa will be, vying for that West title as well. I do like Iowa.
Whoops! Sorry, I hit the button. Goodness gracious!
Hey, I figured you got to cut me off. It's okay.
Yeah,
no,
I really did not like the Iowa mention.
No, let me tell you.
Like
let me say why. I have my tablet and I was reading, my stat sheets, and all of a sudden it went and reset. So I was hooking it into my, or up to power cord, and I accidentally hit the button. I apologize.
But Iowa, Tony, that's where you were.
Yeah, Iowa. Again, Iowa. I feel like one of those. They're right there. The biggest thing is, did they? And what was it we talked? Wasn't it their offense last year that was like bottom of the entire college conference? So. And again, we talked about that. That might be a little bit of nepotism because the head coach's son is the offensive coordinator for the Hawkeyes. So I'm hoping he sat down with dad. I'm hoping he went out and got some advice from other people as far as, retweaking the offense. But yeah, I think.
All right, son, we need more points.
Literally, we need more points. Something. I don't care if it's by the ground. I don't care if it's by the air. You let me know how. We need more points. Defense can't do it all.
To Tony's point, points per game, Iowa ranked 99th in the country. Mm-hmm. Total offense, 121st. And I believe there's 130 teams.
Yeah.
Passing offense, 109th. Rushing offense, 102nd. Look at the defense numbers. Points per game allowed, 13th. Total defense, 17th. Passing defense, 42nd. Rush defense, 13th.
And you're talking about nationwide.
Yeah. And that's with a bad offense. That's with them having to be on the field longer because their offense can't produce.
I think that is the biggest disparity I've ever seen nationally ranked wise an offense and defense be ever.
Yeah. That's it's pretty wide. But and to Tony's point, those are my concerns when I look at Wisconsin and Iowa. It's quarterback play. Spencer Petras has had quite a few shakes in Iowa and really hasn't been able to find a consistent level. There's glimpses, but it's just not consistent enough. Wisconsin, Graham Mertz. I mean, Tony went back to Jack Cohn, and Graham Mertz, the first game he played, we thought it was a Heisman campaign. What he did against Illinois, only one incompletion in his first start. And since then, it's just been a rocky road. The quarterback play really scares me from those two teams, or else I think their rosters put them in a spot where they could win the West and not just win it, but they would be favored to be winning it if you had more consistent play at quarterback. Nebraska, we talked about, that's kind of a question mark at quarterback. You bring Casey Thompson in, it's a new face. We know Purdue's Aiden O'Connell is legit, and we know Tanner Morgan at Minnesota is legit. Tanner Morgan's going into year 6.
I thought it was third. I thought he was in the last year of his 10-year deal that he signed.
So I don't think everybody knows this, but Tanner Morgan's cousins with Tim Couch, and I'm convinced they both showed up on campus at the same time. Like
they probably did. At least Tim said, "You know what? I don't want to play college anymore. I want to go to the NFL." And he's like, "No, I'm going to stay in college. I got to stay relevant."
I think Tim Couch should have stayed around one more year in college just so Cleveland didn't take him.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough. But you look at these teams, and that's kind of how the way the quarterback thing shakes out, because I think the rosters for Iowa and Wisconsin, as Tony mentioned, the defenses there, they're better than the other teams we're talking about. But the quarterback play shakes your faith so much that you're not really sure. Nebraska, we said, is a question mark. But the reason, boy, there's a couple teams still. So, Sam, you took Purdue. Tony, you took Minnesota. I'm going to
go with Nebraska.
I kind of want to, but I'm going to play safe here. I'm going to play safe. So when we reflect back on late August, ahead.
Hold on. Will they remember that you predicted the safe team right, or will they remember that you went on a limb and predicted Nebraska and you nailed it? Because if they don't win it, big deal, you got it wrong. But if you predict it, I'm trying to push you into it.
I was going to say, what a guts and glory speech.
If you take that, and this is thanks to Colin Cowherd.
Disney movie.
Thanks to Colin Cowherd right here. He's like, you take the gutsy pick because they'll remember that you picked it when it happens. And if it doesn't, they'll be like, he was wrong. And that's it.
You know what?
You become a god.
Sam, you've done it.
Yes.
We're going Lincoln. We're going Big Red. We're riding Casey Thompson into the sun. The Huskers are winning the West. They're going from 0 to hero. They're going 1-8 to 7-2 in Big Ten play. 2022 is the year of the Huskers. Right. Scott Frost gets a big extension.
There we
go. Everything's going to change around all in 1 year. So let's take the hot take all the way to the sun, right as close as we can. But I can kind of see it happening. I don't think the schedule's super favorable. The thing, though, with Nebraska is it's better than last year. Last year, they had to play Ohio State, Michigan State, and Michigan for their 3 crossover games.
Right.
East opponents. This year, they have Indiana at home, at Rutgers, and then at Michigan. Besides that, at Michigan, there's a lot there that's really doable.
Short of Purdue's none of those, that that is probably the best one. Yeah.
And I will say, besides the hot takery that we just exposed and sent out there, the other team I really was considering, and I consider to be more safer, is the traditional powerhouse Tony was talking about, Wisconsin. And Tony said because the offensive line, which the offensive line this year by Phil Steele's rankings is 4th in the country, but he talked about the great Badger backs that there used to be with Jonathan Taylor, Melvin Gordon, and so on. I think there's one there in Madison now. I think Braylon Allen is going to be that household name that a lot of people are really going to be knowing. And then you add that in with Ches Malusi. It's a 1-2 punch there in Madison. It's going to be hard for a lot of teams to tackle. So I like Wisconsin, but hey, we're riding Lincoln to the sun. Right. So I'm all in.
2 things real quick. Two things, A and 2. No, the first thing is that's the coach in me, and since I've coached you in the past, that was just me bringing the coach back out and
harkening back to some nostalgia.
Yeah, and second of all is very easily Graham Mertz could what's his last name?
Mertz.
He could easily be really good this year, and Wisconsin could be easily like blow everybody out, and run away with the West. So it is possible that safe pick is the pick to go with because Mertz is going to be perfect, what they hope he is, but he also there's just so much of enough of a question mark that it allows everybody, all these other teams that are going to be good, a spot at the table, and some people to pick them, like Dalton. What would have been great is if I would have had you do it and then I took Wisconsin.
I know. You should have fired him up and then I'm not going to go with Nebraska. I'm going to go with Wisconsin. But real quick too, the other thing you have to give credit to literally all of the Big Ten. Every single Big Ten coach is returning back. We're the only conference that no coach got fired last year. So
how many years has that happened? And when was the last time? It had to have been a year when there were only 10 teams in the conference. It has to be, because there's always just enough influx in there that people are like, nope, we got to go with a change or whatever. It just doesn't seem like there's ever a year that there's not at least 1 to 2 coaches.
Yeah.
It's we might need to look that up, because I think you're right. The other thing I started looking up real quick before we hit the halftime break, none of us picked Wisconsin or Iowa. And Wisconsin has now been to how many of these games for the Big Ten championship? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wisconsin's been to 6 of these Big Ten titles. Iowa's been to 2. Nebraska has been to 1, but Purdue and Minnesota haven't been to any. So we looked at the West Division and we said, let's take, between the three of us, one combined Big Ten championship game appearance. And that's how we ended up. No Wisconsin, no Iowa.
Well, I think that just shows
that you picked.
I think it just shows the parity that usually exists in the West.
You're right. Which, by the way, too, the one time they were there, they did give up 70 points to a Wisconsin Badgers.
Yes, I remember that. Ooh.
Yeah. So,
it easily could be Wisconsin. I mean, it really could easily, but I don't know. I'm personally like, well, it's going to be the last year for divisions. We might as well, or is next year the last?
You'll have next year as well.
Okay. Well, it's one of the last years of divisions, and Purdue hasn't tasted the West Division championship yet, so that's what that. And I think it's not too much of a homer pick, even though it is sort of one. You know what I mean?
And by the way, we did talk some expansion, and we talked a lot about the Big Ten TV contract last week. There are early reports as of now with Brett McMurphy that the Big Ten and Oregon have entered conversations. So we'll see where all of this lands, because
we can talk about that on the other side of the break if we want.
Yeah.
Okay, let's mix that in with a little bit of East talk as we preview and get ready for the
because
season. So.
It would make sense that if they kept divisions, Oregon would go to the East anyway. So.
Well, 100%.
All right, let's hit halftime.
You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
Hi, I'm Tina Jaramillo.
And I'm Hillary Doherty.
And we host the Muck Podcast, where we discuss the dark and sometimes weird true stories in American politics.
Hey, Tina, did you know that Elvis crashed the Nixon White House for the sole purpose of getting a DEA badge, and it worked?
What? Or how a gun control advocate senator out of California engaged in gun trafficking with notorious gang leader Shrimp Boy.
Shrimp Boy, I remember him. Okay, so, we cover all of that and more from maladies, madness, mischief, and murder in U.S. politics.
And we also host a bi-weekly interview segment called Lil Muck.
We interview politicians, journalists, activists, and others who share their experiences in politics.
Find the Muck Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and check us out on social media at the Muck Podcast.
Hey, I'm Pantsless Aaron.
This is Stevie.
And I'm Augie. And we are BFYTW, a podcast all about playing games and having fun. Our games are usually based on British panel shows and game shows, but we'll play anything that captures our attention and imagination. Why? It's right there in the title.
You'll never guess what the F stands for.
And we start the second half. Sam gives a Tiger Woods fist pump as he's able to get the whistle in, and we're ready to go for the third quarter. So
I didn't have to do it manually.
a couple of items that are on tap, and by the way, for a lot of our listeners, they are aware that we record these ahead of time. As we're recording this, we did just get some breaking news, and I really. Actually saw Tony just send it in the chat as well. It was reported that Purdue great and Chiefs great, Len Dawson, has passed away at the age of 87. So I figured we'd take a moment. I thought that was a good move by Tony, that we salute one of the Big Ten greats and one of the NFL greats.
Yeah, see, you said not college related, Tony, but it absolutely, especially with our show.
Boy, Sam was really proud. He was bringing out the Purdue drum right there.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. I forgot he played for Purdue, but you think about really the first great Chiefs quarterback that they had, that helped lead the Chiefs to victory. So, I mean,
well, and think about, Purdue's been a dumpster fire for a good portion of my life. Okay. So, but if you think about it, you've got Len Dawson, who was an NFL great. Bob Greasy was the last quarterback to be the head of an undefeated team. And then you have Drew Brees, who just retired a couple years ago. Those are three monumentally huge NFL quarterbacks in the history of the game. And they all went to West Lafayette. So boiler up, baby. Woo!
But figure we take a moment. It was a good move by Tony to throw that in the chat, and that was breaking news as we were recording this, so we thought it was important to kind of mention.
Well, and I think Len Dawson is a forgotten how great he was. I mean, he was an absolutely great quarterback for the Chiefs, and you know, the people talk about all the you know, top 20 or whatever. I think Len Dawson belongs in that argument easily. So prayers to his family, and you know, and hopefully they can take some solace in in the fact that he was a great and had a wonderful life.
Absolutely. All right, awkward segue out of a passing. We were talking before the halftime break that we talked a lot last week about the Big Ten TV contract, north of $7 billion, nearly $8 billion over a 7-year period between Fox, CBS, and NBC. Go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, I saw an article that said that there is a specific elevator clause just for Notre Dame in that agreement as well.
Yes.
Now, there's an elevator clause. We talked about that last week, but I read that there's actually one in there for Notre Dame alone.
I believe
How is Notre Dame not coming to the Big Ten?
And again, we talked about it before, and really only Jack Swarbrick and company knows, but what is the price amount? What dollars do you have to put on and say, hey, how much is your independence worth? Because right now you're reportedly looking at a $60 million deal to stay independent with the NBC. If college football moves away from the NCAA, and the college football playoff group is going to be the organization of this anyway, and this whole thing gets restructured a different way, and Notre Dame's going to be an outlier, the independency doesn't mean as much just from that point, not so much from a dollar and cents point, but from what the future layout of college athletics looks like. The independence wouldn't mean as much. But also right now, as we're talking dollars, I mean, you can make 40, 50 more million dollars by joining the Big Ten, if not even more than that. So at what point, if we're at 40 or 50, if we drove that up to $80 million a year you're passing by, if we drove it up to $100 million, what would be the number that broke Notre Dame and broke the tradition that sits in South Bend?
I don't know what it is, but I did make I was talking to somebody, and I made the comparison of, you know, you get into these mega conferences where there are 20 plus teams, right? And you're only playing 12 games a season. And if you're only playing 8, let's say, conference games, that means you're leaving more than half of your conference off your schedule. Now, it's going to be close to that if you play a full slate of conference games, but at least you're getting closer. But let's take Purdue's schedule this year and put it into a huge 20 team, and they miss Iowa, they miss Wisconsin, they miss Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State. 6 teams that are annually competitive for their division or even nationally, and Purdue goes 11-1 because they were able to schedule four games outside of the conference. What are people going to say about Purdue? Yeah, they're 11-1, but look who they played. That will be Notre Dame if those conferences say you have to play a full slate. You don't get any outside schedules.
People often do that now. They absolutely discredit Notre Dame's schedule, and Notre Dame's schedule it's difficult. Like, if you actually take a look at Notre Dame's schedule, it's not far removed. Actually, it's more difficult than what some conference teams are playing, even some Big Ten teams. It's
it's definitely harder than Purdue's.
I mean, yeah. I don't understand the constant discredit from that department, but your point is absolutely valid.
But my point is if they don't have those conference teams those mega conference teams to schedule, they don't have a USC, they don't have a Michigan, they don't have Clemson, they don't have Florida State, they can't go get Alabama. I don't think they would anyways, but they can't because those conferences have already said, you know, and this is predicated on the conferences saying you're playing a full slate of conference games. Notre Dame will play Navy and, you know, Ball State and Western Michigan. They go 11-1. People are going to laugh at Notre Dame being considered for the playoff. I don't think, and I've done it over and over in my head thinking, what is a scenario that I can see Notre Dame staying independent and still being relevant? And there isn't one that I've come to that has sufficiently convinced me.
Well, and that also brings up the point, what's the willingness from the college football playoff group if they take over college football to bend at the knee for Notre Dame, and they're wanting to, like, it would have to be cooperated and respected by that group, and that's banking on a lot that they don't need to do. There's no reason that's just granted.
The Big Ten made $7.7 billion without Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to be bending at the knee to Notre Dame.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Tony, why don't you jump in? We've kind of hogged it.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
sorry.
you're good. You're good. Yeah, believe me, Sam and I have talked about this, a lot. And to me, even if you look at the past, Notre Dame has left money on the table before.
Yes.
To me, the big thing I think before was they wanted a guaranteed path to the playoffs. Independency kind of gave them that because they could kind of pick and choose their schedule. Now, kind of to your point where people discredit their schedule a lot of times, I think because especially here, the last 5 years or so, whenever they have played somebody that we would be more respected as far as, actual competitive talent, the Bamas in the playoffs, they get smoked. Last year, their biggest competitor that they played against, the only ranked team they played against was Cincinnati, and they lost. Now, albeit it was a great game, but they still lost. And then that was going to forever be the knock against them if they even tried to, squeeze them in over Cincinnati is no. How are you going to squeeze them in over them when Cincinnati not only beat them, but they lost the only ranked team that they played? Now, this was an idea that I had pitched to Sam as far as them staying independent. I think they could if they decide that they want to rotate games within the Big Ten. Like, you can stay independent, but we get 5 to 6 games out of you. And again, it's against our big names. It's against Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, probably USC. You kind of mentioned earlier about how the Big Ten is in talks with Oregon. I had heard, there is a board of school, the University Board of California has potentially Regents is trying to potentially block UCLA from coming to the Big Ten because they're a public school, whereas USC is a private. They don't have to worry about that. And if they do, I had even saw reports of the Big Ten said, okay, well, if you get rid of UCLA, we're going to go get Stanford, which they had already kind of considered bringing in Stanford as a kind of a sole competitor for Notre Dame. But I could very easily see them, hey, we're going to make you play 5 big-time games of the opponents we want you to play, and then we'll let you pick any team in the Big Ten you want to face, free for all, and then you can decide the rest of your schedule.
What's the incentive to Notre Dame then to do that? That's and I'm not arguing with you, but what's their incentive?
To me, if I'm the Big Ten, I would pitch it, just the same as we have. If all of this gets realigned and you still want to stay independent, you don't want to join a conference, you're going to have to at least have some type of relevancy when it comes to actual competition for them to even consider letting you into the playoffs. So if you face our teams and you get wins, okay, let's say Ohio State's ranked like 6 and Notre Dame beats them. Okay, now they have a little bit more of a contest for, okay, Notre Dame, now we can potentially think about letting you into the playoffs, where as like you said, if they face Navy, if they face Ball State, if they face teams that for the most part, all of us are going to consider basically cupcake games. Okay, cool. You went, 11-1, 12-0, but you didn't really beat anybody. You didn't beat anybody that's, attention grabbing.
But with that though, why wouldn't you just join the conference so you don't hit all 5 of those in 1 year and you play a Purdue, Illinois, Rutgers, and then you're still valid because you got those games. Those are the easy games, but you still are validated because you're in the Big Ten playing and you beat Ohio State this year.
Well, let me poke at this from another angle, because I'm going to say it's not so much about Notre Dame's volition and wanting to play some of the Big Ten opponents. I think a lot more of this has to do with their relationship with NBC. And since all colleges and conferences gave up, the rights to do a lot of different things for the paycheck, $60 million, NBC's now tied with the Big Ten. And there's already reports saying, as Tony mentioned, that the NBC wants to see Notre Dame play Michigan. They want to see these matchups come back, and they're going to make that happen. NBC might make Notre Dame bend at the knee for those matchups. And Notre Dame still just kind of kicking and screaming, trying to hang on to its freedom and independency while kind of playing along with what they have to do with this partnership.
I get that, but then if that's the case and NBC saying you have to play these games, why wouldn't you just join the conference in order to get a little reprieve of the 5 big guns every season in the Big Ten? They play Ohio State, Michigan State, the Wisconsin, like those that would try. Granted, there might be a year you beat 4 out of the 5 of them, but more than likely when the Big Ten, even though they haven't won a lot of championships, they have really strong teams. Okay. And so like, why I guess it would lend to more success if they would just join and then play some of the lesser ones and alleviate a little bit. Maybe work it into where, yes, we're in the conference, but we get to schedule Navy and somebody else outside of the conference.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, a lot of this is working with the assumption that college football is going to change in the layout of all this is going to change.
Yeah,
because
this is all assuming that.
Notre Dame's still tied at the hip with the ACC, where they're required to play 4 games a year. So you factor in their half partnership with the ACC or membership with the ACC, and then you factor in what NBC's got going on and how there's just too many hands and too many different cookie jars for Notre Dame right now. And so if college football is changing, Notre Dame's not going to want to be a part of the ACC if they do have to pick a conference, because the Big Ten is where the money's going to be. The Big Ten and the SEC is where the money's going to be. So a lot of this is working with that assumption that college football will change. The structure will change. But as we currently sit, I think it's just too complicated and there's just too many hands in cookie jars.
Well, and I don't disagree that it could, the way it sits now, they're sitting pretty on their independence.
Correct.
But I think, I think we, and Tony, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think we all kind of see it coming down the line that football is going to break off and be its own thing here in the next 5 years.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And they're going to put things in place that the NCAA would not be putting in place. Much like, hey, you're in a mega conference, and the Big Ten and SEC, as they stand, once they get to 16, 20 teams or whatever, they very easily could say, sorry, you're in our conference. You're playing a full slate of Big Ten games. USC, yeah, you're going to Evanston. You're going out to Piscataway. Your whole schedule is going to be Big Ten. And I just, and I may be dead wrong. I may absolutely be dead wrong, but it doesn't make financial sense for your conference teams to be going outside of your conference to play games that, why not have both? Even Rutgers against USC, it's 2 Big Ten teams playing one another. That makes sense financially for those teams to be playing for the conference. And I'm not, I might sound like I'm yelling. I'm not. I'm just excited. I hate that I've thought about Notre Dame this much. I really do. I absolutely hate it. But it just still does not make any financial or logical sense to me that Notre Dame stays independent. I just can't figure out how they can do it and have them still stay relevant. I think they die a slow death if they stay independent.
Yeah, and plus, we also have to look at this too. Like Dalton said, if the college football breaks off, kind of becomes its own entity, which I think they should, because if I'm the NCAA and you let college football run everything, you're going to really hurt yourself when it comes to college basketball, because look at the money that's there. And like we talked about, it's a Power 6 right now. And, if all reports are, correct, and, the Big Ten continues to raid a lot of these Pac-12 teams, and I'm assuming the Big 12 will do so as well to whatever, Pac-12 teams don't go, then it's going to go down to a Power 5, but still, we have the Big East actually in college basketball, which is a good, fighting conference. So it's like, and I feel like you would kind of need to. And same for Notre Dame. It's like, this doesn't just help your football. This helps your basketball. I think in hockey, if I remember right, they're already in the Big Ten competing.
It's
So
true.
it's like,
Yeah.
you already kind of have like your pinky toe in the pool. Like you kind of stick the foot in, if you still want to be a little hesitant with basketball, baseball, whatever you want to do, you can think about it. But it's like, like Sam said, you're leaving a lot of money, and and kind of like we had talked about with NBC being in this, I think NBC does make them bend the knee, because now NBC wasn't really big as far as college sports go, except Notre Dame. And now, the Big Ten has basically made this like an NFL schedule. They have a 12 o'clock game, they have a 3:30 game, and they're going to have a 7 o'clock game. Literally mirror of an NFL schedule. And yeah, if I'm Notre Dame, it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, why not make a crap ton of money on top of it? Instead of just making them easily, $60 million just from NBC, I could be getting a ton of money from the Big Ten and NBC both.
And I could see the Big Ten incentivizing Notre Dame by saying, hey, for the duration of this new TV deal that you came up with, you can take and keep that money as your own. Give us a certain portion, maybe a third of it. You keep 2/3 of it, plus you'll still get your Big Ten share. So for those first however many years the NBC deal for Notre Dame is going to ended up, they're going to make hand over fist more than, they're going to be like, Jack Swarbrick would literally be Scrooge McDucking it and jumping into just pools of cash. And they'll never see the 7 o'clock time slot on NBC unless they're playing a Big Ten team, obviously. But I don't, if they go, NBC might be like, well, you get a 3:30 game every week.
Yep.
Until you come into the Big Ten. You're not seeing the Big Ten or the 7 o'clock slot. I don't know.
It'll be fascinating to watch, and we'll talk Big Ten East next week because we'll actually kick off. I know we kind of ran long. Well, and before we get to the fourth quarter, I'll kind of punctuate this segment by saying, because we started with the Brett McMurphy report that Big Ten and Oregon are in conversations. Keep in mind, we talked about this when all of this stuff was starting to break loose. John Skipper, who's a former ESPN president and now with Meadowlark Media, when he was talking about when he used to sit in the ESPN chair, what he would advise conferences to do, and what the Big Ten's blueprint, and if you follow the breadcrumbs, has been, is the Big Ten has added teams in different states, and they've went for the biggest markets. Oregon would be another state. Oregon and Washington make sense hand-in-hand wise. That's another state. So keep in mind, adding different states means a lot when it comes to the TV markets. So we'll see. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
No, that's fine. I was just putting my hand up for when you were done. I will still stay on I will stay on this stump about this. If they're going to go someone other than Notre Dame, they need to go to Baylor.
Texas.
The state of Texas is a huge, and Dallas is like the number 5 market in the country.
That's their last big market that they would have. That
would give them the top 5. And Baylor hasn't been too shabby in football or basketball in the past 10 years.
National title 2 years ago in basketball. So
and they won the Big 12 last year. So in football. So I honestly, I'm not saying anything horrible about Oregon, because you're absolutely right. That's another state. It's another market. But I think if you want to go all in on something, you went to LA, for crying out loud, to get your next 2 teams. Why not go to Waco and get Baylor and get that Dallas market?
No, fair enough. It's something to chew on.
Yeah, I'm every once in a while I have a decent idea.
All right, on that note, we'll close out the third quarter and head over to the fourth.
That was an appropriate whistle there.
It was. It was good timing.
The middle of a segment.
All right, if you're new to the program, the fourth quarter, which shame on you if you're new to the program, but this is the part of the show where we pick out something that stood out to us in the last week, and we make it our own headlines. Do we have a graphic for Tony? Do we have a name? Is it the Tony Time?
Who are you
Tony
talking
Tribune.
to?
You did
Who
Tony
are you
Tribune.
talking to?
Tony Tribune. Yeah.
All right, what's the headline for Tony Tribune?
Oh man. Man, I was hoping that I didn't have to go first because I was having to think about it.
Do you want me to switch? We can.
We can But yeah.
Okay, fine. Give me 1 second here. It's Tony's fault that we have this difficulty at this time. That's fine.
Way to just throw him under the bus.
Hey, you know what? He's the one.
You know, there hasn't been any kinks yet. There hasn't been any hiccups. I mean, except for cutting me off.
I was going to say,
but,
what are you talking? That was like one of the biggest kinks we've ever had. I had a whistle in the middle of a segment.
All right,
that and you blamed your ex-wife for Wisconsin being down this year.
It's true.
But am I wrong? But
I'm gonna take your word for it, Tony.
I was gonna say this seems like areas we shouldn't be weighing in on. Let's go to the Sam Sentinel.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of a gripe here. Okay, so College Basketball Report on Twitter tweeted out a graphic of the 20 college teams that do more with less or / less with more. I'm gonna read quickly over the top 20 that do more with less. You tell me where there's issues, and I will weigh in on it as well. Number 20 is New Mexico State. Number 19, Colorado. Number 18, Murray State. Number 17, San Diego State. Number 16, Belmont. Number 15, Dayton. Number 14, Iowa. Number 13, Loyola of Chicago. 12, Creighton. 11, Texas Tech. 10, Iowa State. Number 9, North Carolina. Number 8, Syracuse. Number 7, Baylor. Number 6, Kansas. Number 5, Houston. Number 4, Wisconsin. Number 3, Virginia. Number 2, Michigan. And number 1, Villanova. What were there any teams that stuck out to you on that?
There were 5.
Yeah,
Kansas, Texas Tech, North Carolina, Michigan. I don't know what we're doing here.
My question is where in the world is Purdue? Because since the early 1980s with Gene Cady and Matt Painter, Purdue has hardly ever been expected to do anything, and many times they contend. Gene Cady won a 3 straight Big Ten titles, and 1 year he had Glenn Robinson. The other 2, they were expected to have extremely down years, and he won the Big Ten. He got a number 1 seed with one of those teams even. So it's not that even that I'm a homer. It's just that I've been a fan of Purdue since the early 1980s. And if there's a program that has done more with less, I cannot tell you one other than now. Don't get me wrong. They haven't won national titles. They haven't even been to Final Fours. I understand that. But it doesn't say who's won the most national titles with less. It's who's done more with less. Mm-hmm. If you look at the top 5 winningest coaches in the Big Ten, it's Tom Izzo, it's Bob Knight, it's Gene Cady, it's Lou Henson, and it's Matt Painter. 2 of those top 5 are Purdue coaches. You cannot tell me they haven't done more with less. So College Basketball Report, I don't know where you got the graphic, if you made it yourself, but you are way wrong on this. And I got it from a tweet from Etwan Moore. He tweeted out and said, this is horrible. And I completely agree that I'm not even saying Purdue's number 1, but they should be in the top 20. And that's my gripe at the Sam Sentinel.
And you can't do more with less when you routinely pull in 5 stars, which is what North Carolina, Kansas, and some of these do.
Baylor?
This is such a suspect list, and it's one of many I've seen.
Now there are some on there that absolutely belong. Belmont, Loyola, Chicago, they've been to a Final Four as an 11 seed. So I mean, some of those teams absolutely belonged on there.
Happy birthday to Sister Jean, by the way, turning 103 this past week.
Wow.
How about that?
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah.
I hope I live to be that old, but I'm not holding my breath, because if I did, I wouldn't be here. But yeah, it just that list, it fired me up. I'm like, I can see why Etwan was upset with that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so now, Tony, are you ready?
I do. Okay. I actually have something. It's a little bit of a parody, but it is news. So apparently Michigan still has a quarterback controversy, but not with 2 quarterbacks, now with 3. Because you have McNamara, you have McCarty. Wide receiver of Michigan, Roman Wilson, came out and said that he is the best option at quarterback that they have currently. He has 0 catches, 0 pass attempts. Like he's just been depth chart at this point. And when asked about the recent, quarterback controversy, he said that, between both of them, their best option is me at quarterback. So apparently we have a third that's going to be, vying with Jim Harbaugh to, continue their dominance of being the Big Ten East champions and the Big Ten champions overall in Michigan. And I get maybe he's poking fun, maybe he's having a little bit of a laugh, and maybe again he's just trying to keep it secret. It still makes me worried because obviously McNamara and McCarthy are still going to be your two main starting quarterbacks at Michigan. But the fact that Jim won't commit to one or the other, you won't force the other one to, one of the two to grow in an area that maybe they don't succeed very well in. I'm not a huge Michigan fan, but as a Big Ten fan, as somebody that likes watching Michigan play, I'm like, man, that's. Maybe you do go with Roman Wilson. Maybe you do like, hey man, let's see what you got. You can't catch. Maybe you can throw. We'll see what you got.
Well, and honestly, Tony, I think that's one of the reasons why Michigan's going to struggle this year because they won't commit to a quarterback. There's not been a team ever that I'm aware of that went with two quarterbacks on a rotation and did well. Not even won championships, done well because it's so unsettling. Mm-hmm. Those quarterbacks don't know when they're getting yanked,
and that's from any level, like the NFL, collegiate, any of those. It's like you can't. What's the phrase? If you have two really good quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback at all because you're supposed to only have one good quarterback, and you have maybe a really good backup that has starter potential somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me because I understand the fan expectations of McCarthy because they understand the athleticism he brings and the potential he carries. But Cade McNamara was a starting quarterback on a Michigan Big Ten championship team. No quarterback's been able to say that for 17 years. And we're talking about maybe taking the snaps away. It's such a bizarre conversation to be having around these circumstances. But
that's because Jim Harbaugh is busy circling teams that are going to struggle in the NFL this year, and he's going to go after them and be the coach there. I wholeheartedly think his heart is not in coaching Michigan this year. It's which NFL team's going to want me next season. I used to love Jim Harbaugh as a player. He played for the Bears for crying out loud. He was captain comeback with the Colts. I mean, he has been with teams in my area and my life, his whole career, and I loved him. But at Michigan, I liked him in San Francisco. Just in Michigan, it seemed like he thought he was going to walk in and just beat Ohio State half the time that he played them, and he was in Minnesota. He was the coach in his mind for the Vikings when he left for Minneapolis that day. I mean, he had no intentions of returning to Ann Arbor, and I think it's kind of showing because he just won't commit to a quarterback.
Yeah. I did give one of the Michigan fans on ASAP Network a little bit of grief because he knows I'm a Spartan fan. I got accepted into Michigan State, so I was excited about that. And I told, and he was giving me a little bit of grief. I said, I didn't have to worry about Tom Izzo or Mel Tucker going anywhere. However, your basketball and your football coach both contemplated going to the pros. And then they were like, no, we love Michigan. We're not going to go anywhere now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They loved it because the pro deals fell through.
Oh, this is one of the beauties, though, of finally getting to really work with Tony for the first time. I didn't know we had so much in common. Welcome to the club. I'm excited about this. We can finally gang up on Purdue Pete over there in the bottom corner. But anyway, taking a look at
bigger than both of you combined. Although Tony is very tall.
Taking a look at the Dalton Daily. I had this thought, and I'm trying to think of how to correctly transcribe and communicate what it is, but it's an appreciation because in the midst of everything going on with college sports and college football right now, I mean, NIL has kind of made waters a little bit dirty in some aspects. It's been good in some aspects, but you've also seen some different things going on. You've seen conference realignment. You've seen flat out greed in different instances in college athletics. There's a lot that can maybe be said that's wrong with college sports, and it's certainly different than what we got to know growing up and throughout our lives. But as we finally kick off the college football season and summer is kind of winding to a halt, you're instantly starting to crave and miss those brats being cooked on the grill. You're missing hearing the fight songs. You're missing seeing the bands make their way through campus. You're missing interacting with people at tailgates, having fun, getting together with people. It's such a culture unto itself that even though college athletics is losing a lot of core things that we used to think about college athletics and a lot of different principles of values, we're still at a point where it is an absolute part of our culture in just America itself, that on Saturdays, this is what you do. And it harkens you back to a really good feel-good spot where it's something that you strive to do, you want to be doing. So as we kick off the Big Ten season, I just wanted to take a moment that even though we've gone through a lot of different things in college sports, we have college football back, and that means something. And it means a lot of good times with people we love, kind of hoping for the very best on Saturdays and hoping you get to see wins and you get to experience triumph and create memories that last the rest of your life. So we are here, and it's finally time for it to come back.
Well, I made this comment on my other podcast that I've got is, while it is, like you said, you've got NIL and it's been basically like a pro league anyways, there's still that semblance of college pride that exists. And I am not a band geek, and I'm not saying that in a demeaning way. I'm not a band geek, but I love the as the bands get ready, or the fight song. The one thing I'm super excited about, and I've only heard it played once in real life, because I was lucky enough to see a USC Notre Dame game in person. I love the USC fight song being played by a marching band.
No,
I said the song, for crying out loud. I didn't say I like USC.
No,
get over it.
I can't get on board with this one.
Oh,
this take has gone one too far. The same song. I don't think the band knows two songs. I think it's just one song.
I don't care. Well, bully for you, mister. I don't care.
There needed to be another voice on this take, so I'm glad to supply it. That needed to be heard.
But all in all, I love just hearing, bands, marching bands playing at, not necessarily even, making sure to watch the halftime show. I'll listen. I don't necessarily need to watch it, but I love just hearing the drum line walking through with the band, basically giving them their cadence, to walk and everything or whatever. And it's just, it's like you said, music is one of those things that will pull you back to someplace in the past like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
music and smells both.
Yeah, and those marching band cadences and stuff like that take me back to Muncie when I got kicked out of a football game for getting in a fight with the Toledo band. Well, argument, not a fight. We weren't physical. We were arguing.
We need to hear on the next show for sure,
and that's fine.
And this is why Sam isn't a big band fan. It's because of that instance right there.
Let's just say I'm probably the reason why somebody got kicked off the Toledo band. I'm just saying. And the kicker is we got kicked out, and I'll preface it and then I'll finish it. But got kicked out and went back to our place where we were tailgating, and literally 30 feet away was the Toledo band bus. So when they loaded up, they had to pass us again, and I wasn't quiet about it.
Yeah, we absolutely need the details of that next week. But as we get ready to say goodbye for this week's show, Sam, you want to let everybody know where they can find us?
Absolutely. I just put the banner across the top. If you're watching, the three main ways to get a hold of us, directly to the show are Big Ten at Big Ten Plus 4. Spell out the plus, Tony. Spell out the plus, Dalton. Don't put the little plus sign, because you will not find us. But Big Ten Plus 4 on Twitter. Just search Big Ten Plus 4 with or without the plus spelled out. It doesn't matter on Facebook. Find us at oddpodsmedia.com for our audio stuff, and for our video, ASAP Network. ASAP is fantastic. We get to show our beautiful faces every week, And well, my beautiful face, and Dalton, you do it, you make it work, I guess. Good thing you're great at your job. No, I'm joking. No, but ASAP, a fantastic opportunity to stream on their network every week, every Friday at 8:45. You can see all sorts of great sports shows there. So make sure you're following them on Twitter and on Facebook as well, social media. And yeah, we're having some fun, and it's just been a good time thus far, and it's getting even better.
That's right. Having Tony Hollandsworth around has been a nice boost to, as we said, the Big Ten's expanding. We're expanding too. And so we've got Tony here in the mix. We're going to have a lot of fun moving forward with all of this. So we do want to thank all of you for tuning in and joining us for this week's edition of Big Ten Plus 4. For myself, Dalton Shetler, Tony Hollandsworth, Sam Sprunger, so long. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later.